Hello, everyone. My name is Jace Troy. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Program Assistant for NAMI New Hampshire. And we are so excited to have you all here today to talk about LGBTQ plus support groups in New Hampshire. So with that being said, let's jump right in, and I'm going to introduce our first presenter, Jessica Goff. Her pronouns are she, her, hers. And Jessica is the Education and Training Manager at Seacoast Outright, and will be talking to us a little bit today about Seacoast Outright and the support groups that they have to offer.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jace. I'm going to pull up a few slides so I don't forget any of the things that we do. Can y'all see that? Wonderful. Hi, everybody. As Jace said, Jess Goff, she, her pronouns, and I'm Seacoast Outright's Education and Training Manager. I also have my MSW. Sometimes I throw that after my name, but all the letters. Excited to be here. So a little bit about Seacoast Outright. I've been with the org for 2 years as an employee and was the MSW intern for a year before that. And so we've definitely gone through a huge period of growth in the past few years. So excited to share what we've been up to. Our mission is to serve, support, and advocate for LGBTQ plus youth in the greater Seacoast area of New Hampshire and beyond across New Hampshire. And that looks a variety of different ways. And so we do have direct programming for LGBT youth, which is what I'll be focusing on today. We also do school engagement, caregiver support groups and referrals, LGBT competency trainings, partnerships and advocacy work, and more. I don't know if anyone was at Portsmouth Pride this past weekend, but my brain is a little bit mush from running around in circles at that. We do put that event on, but hoping folks were able to check that out. So I'll go over some of the support groups that we have. And so our main supports are LGBT youth support groups. And so we have a few different age ranges. Our traditionally aged group is for youth in middle and high school, but we've more recently added a younger youth group. So I'll talk about our caregiver support group in a moment. But there had been a lot of folks asking for a group for younger youth, folks with kids in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade who were like, my kid's too young to go to the middle school group. What can we do? And so about a year ago, we ended up starting our Little Outriders group, and that is for youth in grades K through 5. And that meets alongside our caregiver support group in Portsmouth on the first Friday of the month from 7 to 8. With the 4th of July this upcoming week, it'll be pushed a week, but we always put all of that on our website and calendar. And then again, our kind of traditionally aged group are for youth in middle and high school, so grades 6 through 12. We offer a virtual peer support group, which youth from anywhere all over the state are welcome to join for that. And that's on alternating Tuesdays from 7 to 8. So on the second Tuesday of the month, any middle schooler is welcome to sign up to attend that. And then on the 4th Tuesday of the month is for high schoolers. And so the way that we manage that, our youth are welcome to go to our website and sign up, and then they'll receive the link for every meeting. As well, we just need info to make sure they're actually a kid. And then we have Dungeons and Dragons. Our kids love it. I fully have no idea what's happening when they're playing, but they seem to be having a great time. So we love to be able to offer that and have some great volunteer facilitators who run it. And so on the second Wednesday of the month, we generally host a virtual Dungeons and Dragons group. And I've also started hosting some in-person groups on periodic Saturdays. And then our main kind of group is our Friday night group. So every single Friday night at Community Campus in Portsmouth, we offer a group for middle and high schoolers. In the next few months, we're going to start breaking things up. So some weeks are middle school, some weeks are high school, and to be able to kind of reshift our age groups a little bit. So definitely keep an eye on that. But that is every Friday, 7 to 8:30 at Community Campus in Portsmouth. There's no need to sign up. Youth are welcome to just drop in whenever, which is wonderful. And we also have some young adult groups coming soon. So as we kind of shift age ranges, we're working to have one Friday a month be for those young adults. We've had a lot of people asking for that as well. So are excited to start offering that. And then we also do events and outings. So we host an alphabet prom every year in the spring, which is so much fun. It's an LGBT affirming prom for high schoolers. We also do a Halloween party. We do a youth after party. So for Portsmouth Pride this past weekend, we had a youth after party with drag and dancing and pizza for high school aged kids, and they loved it. We also do outings to places like Water Country and the Music Hall and other folks in the greater Portsmouth area. Again, any of these things are open to youth all over the state. We also have some kids come from right over the border in Maine and Mass. So we've really started to pivot to offering some virtual options as well. And we'll talk in a moment about some other locations, but our primary location is in Portsmouth. And then some other things that we offer, we have our caregiver support group, and that's on the first Friday of the month, and that meets hybrid. So again, parents from anywhere all over the state, we have caregivers of a trans kid who's 4 years old to caregivers of a gay son who's 25 or 30. And so really caregivers of youth of any age are welcome to attend. And that's in person at community campus or virtually. And really an opportunity for parents to talk to each other. Again, I think any of us who work with the organization are able to give some suggestions, but if you haven't navigated a system or a situation with your own child, it's a different kind of level at which folks are able to connect. So really appreciate being able to offer that. We also do school GSA support. And so for anyone who's interested, we do connect with GSAs in the area, and we are working on launching a GSA network for the fall. So really excited about being able to offer that. And we have some partnerships with other groups. And so we do a collaborative group with Waypoint's Runaway and Homeless Youth Program in Rochester. And so on bi-weekly Wednesdays, that's in person in Rochester, and we have alternating groups. And so one Wednesday, it'll be for youth ages 13 to 18, and then the next is 18 to 24. And so it's really wonderful to be able to offer a group in collaboration, especially for youth who are struggling with housing, which we know disproportionately impacts LGBT youth. We also partner with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and so they have a New Hampshire PRISM project, and what they're able to do is match LGBT youth with affirming adults, which is really wonderful, and we help collaborate on that. And really exciting, we have some statewide youth group collaborations coming soon, so definitely keep an eye on that. We're really hoping to be able to offer opportunities for LGBT youth to connect in other areas of the state in partnership with groups who are already on the ground. And so really excited to see that come to fruition in the next year or so. A few other things we do in rapid fire. We do trainings for schools, nonprofits, other groups, panels. We represent the LGBT youth voice on a number of boards and steering committees. We also have a new queer youth resilience project where we're able to help train mental health providers across the state of New Hampshire. We know that there is a huge lack of folks who feel competent in working with LGBT youth. And so really trying to help with that. And we also do advocacy. We know that the legislative landscape is not great right now, for lack of better, that's putting it nicely. But we do a lot of education and advocacy around policies that would impact our LGBT youth. I know that was rapid fire of all of the things, but definitely happy during the Q&A period to answer some questions.
You did have one quick question in the chat, Jessica. Just what's the age limit for young adults in that young adult programming coming soon?
A great question. We are still figuring out what the upper age limit will be on that. We're thinking it'll be 25. Most of the programs do that just so 18 to 25 kind of feels as far as we can extend it likely, but definitely open to having some flexibility there, especially for the over 18s. There can, I think, be a little bit more flexibility depending on, developmental level and things like that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So that was Seacoast Outright, and now we are going to introduce ARC New Hampshire, which stands for the Addiction Recovery Coalition of New Hampshire. And we are joined today by Gray Sommers, who uses he, him, his pronouns, and is the executive director of ARC New Hampshire. And we're also joined by David Pearson, who uses he, him, his pronouns, and is a volunteer group leader for one of the support groups, or maybe multiple of the support groups at ARC New Hampshire. So take it away, Gray and David.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jace, for the introduction. And Jessica, all I can say is, wow, I had not seen the outline of your programs. That is robust, to say the least. Well done. That's fabulous. My name is Grace Summers. I'm the executive director here at the Addiction Recovery Coalition in New Hampshire. And what we are is a recovery community organization, one of 20 in the state. We're located in Milford, so we're kind of it in terms of recovery organizations between Manchester and Nashua in the east and Keene in the west. And we focus on providing peer support recovery services or recovery coaching. We also do a lot to help family members, friends, and loved ones of those with addiction and mental health or behavioral health diagnoses. And you're welcome anytime to come visit us. Our address is in the chat. And just a little bit more about me. So I've been with ARC New Hampshire for 4 months. Prior to that, I was a co-founder of Aware Recovery Care, which pioneered a year-long in-home addiction treatment program. And for any of you that have health insurance questions, I'm usually pretty judicious about announcing this, but I'm the former president of Anthem in New Hampshire. So seriously, if you do have issues with health insurance, I still know a lot of people there as well as at other health insurers. So I'll throw that out there because sometimes that becomes an issue. But I'm delighted to be part of the call. I've been involved with LGBTQIA for a long time, going back. I mean, I'm an OG, right? So I lived in Manhattan in the 80s, lost a number of friends to AIDS before they had the retrovirus. And I saw that up close and personally, and it deeply impacted me. So I really thank everyone who does this work. It's so important, particularly for the work that we do, because this population is affected so disproportionately by substance use disorder and behavioral health conditions. So what I want to do now is introduce David Pearson, who, as Jace mentioned, is one of our group volunteer leaders. He's going to talk about our LGBTQIA plus meeting on Thursday, 6 p.m., 180 Elm Street here in Milford. We also do it virtually. Again, the information, both the address and the Google Meet link are in the chat. So.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm David Pearson. Thanks, Gray. Like you said, the information's in the chat. We run the group. We're just starting to get it off the ground, looking to get some headway on it. And we do it virtually as well as in person. And basically what we're doing is opening it up to anyone who is struggling with addiction or knows anybody with addiction issues, or is also struggling with identity or gender identity or sexual preference issues. They're welcome to come by, and we talk about all types of issues. Like for June being Pride Month, we opened it up for, what is it that you're proud of? What brings you pride for yourself? And that was what we based our meetings off of. And it went very, very well. And so, yeah, we just try to engender a feeling of pride and inclusion, and to get a good feeling out for everybody. A lot is building community and relationships, and affirming self-worth is the big part of our meetings. So thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things too that we focus on here at ARC is veterans. So we do a lot with veterans. If you happen to have any, steer them our way. And our group, again, meets Thursdays, 6 to 7 p.m. on a weekly basis. You don't have to be in recovery to attend. But, if you're looking to talk about or get support for any of the things that David pointed out, we are here for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. It's always good to have resources all over the state in different places. So with that being said, we are now going to introduce Fred Poisson. His pronouns are he, him, his, and he is the Executive Director for Connections Peer Support. Fred, if you would like to take it away, tell us a little bit about Connections Peer Support and the support groups you offer.
Hi there, I'm Fred. First, let me just say I've had Jessica come to my location, and she does a phenomenal job presenting. So they are a great organization. So we have a location at 544 Islington Street in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and we also have another location at 162 First New Hampshire Turnpike in Northwood, New Hampshire, that we're hopefully going to be opening more and more services up to over the next year. In Portsmouth, though, on Tuesdays at 3 p.m., we offer an LGBTQIA plus support group. It's for everyone, including allies. And it's not just a support group. We like to look at it as a social group too. It's a place for people to just come and be humans and make connections. And that's what we try to do at the center all day. We try to make it friendly to everyone. We make sure that we are representing as many groups as possible here. And we try to get as much feedback as possible to make sure that the environment becomes more and more comfortable for everyone. We also have a warm line that people can call for support 7 days a week, 365 days a year from 5 to 10 p.m. That is also LGBTQ friendly. We try to make all of our services friendly to all environments. The main focus of Connections is peer support. We offer free mental health support on the Seacoast. We don't turn away anyone. Like, you can walk across the bridge from Maine, and we're not going to say, oh, we only offer services in New Hampshire. Our services are available to people 18 and over, though. That is our one restriction, is our services are only available to 18 and over. All of our services are 100% free. And you don't need a referral or anything to come here. It's just a place to come, meet people, and get support.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fred. I noticed that you said that all of your services are free, so I want to turn things back to Jessica and Gray real quick and ask about cost of services, if there is a cost for any of your services or programs.
Sure, I'll go first. There is no cost for our services. Everything is free. That's the short answer. And anyone can
Beautiful.
stop in. It doesn't have to be during the group time from 6 to 7. We're open 6 days a week, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays 8 to 4. We also make our facility available for group meetings if people want to use the space. Ironically, we're in the old Milford Courthouse, so we've got some really good meeting rooms. We've got a full kitchen. David's put together a terrarium. We've got a gecko and two tree frogs, so it's actually really cool to come in and hang with us.
Very good. Thank you.
Not tree frogs, but we do have our services free. And so yeah, all of our youth supports are free. Parent support group is always free. Every once in a while we'll have like an event that's a fundraiser, things like that, but our core youth and family support groups are always free.
Wonderful. Thank you all. We love free services. And with that, oh, actually, I had one more question for you, Jessica. Since you serve a lot of youth, do the youth and young adults have to get permission slips from their caregivers in order to attend these groups or meetings?
That is a great question. We do require that when youth attend, they fill out a form that just has emergency contact information. For our little outriders, yes, I mean, they're coming alongside their parent, coming to parent support group. So they're in the room next door. But for our middle high school group, we just have them sign a form that has emergency contact information. I will say, especially for our in-person groups, most youth are brought to the location by a parent. And so generally we don't have any issues. Sometimes a friend's parent will bring them. But we do have the virtual support groups also, and the barrier is a lot lower for those. So we definitely have youth sign on who kind of go to their bedroom and kind of log on to the virtual support group. And they are also very, very welcome to do that.
Okay, well, at this point, I am going to open it up to questions from our audience members. If anybody has any questions for any of these wonderful folks, now is the time.
I have a question for everybody. So Kim Murdoch with NAMI New Hampshire. We, of course, I think are all aware that the availability of services varies a lot statewide. New Hampshire's not a huge state, but what's available up in Berlin is likely a lot different than what might be available in Portsmouth. So I'm wondering if you can speak to, for each of our presenters, number one, if somebody from somewhere outside your region is interested in engaging, if that is okay. And number two, I know, for example, there are peer support networks or peer support agencies throughout the state, but like, are other organizations offering similar programming? So let you take that in whatever order makes sense.
Sure, I'll go first. We'll take anybody. We have obviously a physical meeting on Thursdays, but it's virtual as well. So anyone who wants to connect virtually from anywhere in the state is welcome to join us.
I'll go next if you don't mind. I have people come from all over the state of New Hampshire, and we also have people come from Maine and Massachusetts, and we don't turn anyone away. Again, 18 and over is really the only restriction we have on that.
Absolutely. So yes, yep, folks are welcome to come from wherever in New Hampshire, and even across the border for our programs. I will say we're the only nonprofit in the state whose sole mission is supporting LGBTQ+ youth. So there are sometimes I'd say pop-up groups that other organizations will host for youth, but we can't always vouch for kind of what model they use or what that looks like. And so that's kind of where our desire to have some expansion and to partner with groups across the state is coming in. And so we'll be able to have a partnership and vouch that groups kind of follow our model and have facilitator training and all of the things. So definitely more to come on that, and excited to see that launched in the next year.
I can't necessarily speak for other peer support agencies. I have looked at calendars, and I know that there aren't specific LGBTQ groups on them, but I also know the staff, and I know that they're very supportive of the community. So On the Road to Wellness, one-to-one peer, they're all great organizations, and their calendars change month to month. Our calendar stays pretty consistent. We have the support group every month.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much.
I have a question for the crew. Hello, my name is Catherine Cox. I'm the statewide suicide prevention coordinator with the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm joined by my intern, Julia Johnston, who's hanging out. Thank you so much for bringing this together and sharing out your resources. We're furiously taking notes just to make sure that we do have a LGBTQ plus resource list that we have provided to both the Access Point and to our 90-day Lifeline centers, just to make sure that they know what sort resources are available. But I don't know if we get as granular as some of like what days and times these are happening. And so I would love to make sure I follow up to get those. If maybe we could share what was in the chat. But my question is, what are the gaps that you're seeing in terms of support, or what are, so that's first, is like, where are you seeing that there isn't really a lot of support, but you have a desire to sort of build something? And my second question is, what are some of the key topics that you all are providing support around? Like, I know, just in general, some of like the themes or things that that would be really helpful as we think about routing people and making sure we're disseminating information. You can take it like youth up, or Fred, you can start, we can go backwards, whatever you'd like, peer support, whatever. I know everyone brings a different flavor here.
So I can speak not just for this area, but prior to this, I worked in Maine, and I ran a young adult transitional living program in Biddeford and Portland. And one of the biggest underserved groups that I have seen for LGBTQIA would be people on the spectrum. a group dedicated specifically to them and their communication style. It's very, very important because they communicate differently, they receive communication differently, and they need support that looks a little different too. And you don't generally see that. I try to focus. One of my areas of specialty is executive functioning. So I try to focus all of our groups at Connections so that they adapt to the executive functioning needs of anyone that shows up for that group. And we generally ask people at the start of the group if there's any sort of support that they need around those things.
Yeah, I can go next. I think Catherine, Julia, number one, having a really robust resource directory, that's super important, and being able to get the information out to the population, right? I mean, that's always, one of the $64,000 questions. How do you do effective outreach? And that's a work in progress. So, we focus a lot, of course, on peer support. And again, we know that this population is way disproportionately affected by substance use disorder and behavioral health diagnoses. So, finding the right avenues, the right channels to get people dialed in, to let them know that we're here, that all of us are here, I think is, where we can use some guidance or support. And I get it. It's a work in progress, and today's call is part of that. But yeah, we certainly focus on peer support for those in recovery, help support their recovery, but really, just also provide a safe environment for people to come in. I mean, New Hampshire, comes in a lot of different shades, right, politically. So depending on where you live, it may not be the most comfortable place. So we really want to create that comfort zone and allow people to come in and be themselves.
It's a really great question. I will say that there are huge gaps in New Hampshire because of just how things are funded state-wise. There's a lot of piecemeal supports. I think some states have a more robust network of supports across the state, and New Hampshire is very nonprofit based, just again because of funding and the way that things work. And so there are a lot of pockets of services that can be a challenge, especially in a state like New Hampshire where our public transportation is not ideal, I will say. And so, as I mentioned, we're really trying to have some of those offshoot groups and coordinate across the state. But I will say there's always going to be youth who aren't able to get to an in-person group, regardless, even if it's 10 minutes away from their house. And so another thing that we've been working on is supporting GSAs, or gender and sexuality alliances, within schools, because we know a lot of kids spend a lot of time in school. And so having a group that is, on location, that they may not need parent support or parent permission to be at, is really huge. So we've been supporting GSAs across the Seacoast, but are really hoping to get this GSA network statewide off the ground to support those facilitators of the groups as well. And doing lots of teacher trainings. Again, we can't connect with every youth in the state, but there are a number of teachers who are connecting with kids each and every day. And so trying to provide the support so that people can provide the support has also been really huge. The other thing that I will say, just as we're talking about different groups for especially folks with disabilities, I know that Able New Hampshire does have a group for adults with developmental disabilities who are LGBT. So I don't know the details of that, but it's my understanding that they do have a group. I will say a lot of the kids who come to our group are neurodivergent, probably 50 to 75%. And so we haven't really had a need to have an offshoot group because most of the youth in the group are neurodivergent, and it would be almost an exact duplication. And so we do a lot to accommodate youth. We especially see those youth with the lower support needs who might not qualify for other disability-specific services, but really need a space where they're able to take a break when they need a break and are able to stim, and no one's going to look at them weird because they're in a group of other neurodivergent people. And so we definitely accept youth with all ability levels as long as they're able to be in that group setting and function with that level of support, I would say. But definitely reach out if there's ever a youth who you're not sure if they would be a fit. We're always happy to accommodate kiddos and their needs.
Thank you so much. There's another question in the chat. I believe it's for everyone. And it says, is there an organization for 26 plus? Definitively need autism spectrum support.
I would definitely suggest the Able New Hampshire group. I can try to find a link for that and throw it in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jess. And another question in the chat for everyone is, are facilitators for your meetings a volunteer position? And if so, if someone wants to become a facilitator, how would they go about that? And I would expand that to say, not just facilitators, but any kind of volunteer positions in your organization. What are you looking for, and what would be most helpful in supporting LGBT individuals in the state? And that's also for everyone or anyone.
Sure, I don't mind going first. So our position is volunteer. Obviously, David is here as one. And we are happy to bring other people in if there's any questions or people want to get involved. I'll put my email address in, and people can feel free to reach out to me. But we certainly would welcome the support of volunteers and other people who are passionate about LGBTQIA plus population and issues, particularly where we are in the Milford south central part of the state. So that would be great.
I can go next. So our groups are generally staff run, but we encourage volunteers as well. And our LGBTQIA group is actually run by staff and a volunteer that comes in every week to do it. They are transmasculine, and they run an excellent group, and they have actually helped us to bring in a bit of a younger crowd in the afternoon, which is what we are looking to do, is to open up our services a little bit later in the day, because right now the majority of our program happens earlier in the day with older individuals, and we are really looking to bring in that 18 to 28 age group.
Happy to hop in here. Our group, so we've grown a lot in the past few years. We went from having a half of a staff person / one staff person a couple of years ago to now having 4 full-time staff people, which is wonderful. As you can see, we do a lot of things, so not all of us run youth groups. But we do have our youth program coordinator who is generally running the programs. Every once in a while, we will have MSW interns, and we also do have volunteer facilitators as well. We're just now leaning more on staff to have that continuity for youth rather than kind of having as much of the transients of having those other facilitators. And of course, they're background checked and go through a process. But generally, it's a little bit of a mix now.
Thank you all. Next question is, do any of you offer any of your programming or services in languages other than English? And I see Catherine's hand up, so we'll go there next.
We do not.
Yet. The power of yet. Catherine.
Raise my hand for Julia.
Julia.
Oh, this is actually a question. So I'm working with a behavioral epidemiologist who's focusing on gathering data. Again, my pronouns are she, her. I have permission to share this. I have a trans sibling. And what I'm learning a lot is that we need to be asking not only youth and adults information so that we can inform, general policymakers to make the decisions we want them to make. So with that in mind, what are you gathering with your groups so that we can actually take that information, apply it, and hopefully get the results and legislation we want?
That's a wonderful question. I will say it's a continual struggle between what data we collect and how do we make programs low barrier. I think the more information you ask, generally the less people want to engage, because I think there's some mistrust of the system, which has been earned, I will say. And so I think we kind of try to walk that line of what we gather for information. And yeah, I think there are some really great studies that are happening. I will say our kids don't love answering survey information, and their identity labels tend to change over time as they're figuring things out in adolescence. So, you know, and they also change their names. So it's hard to have continuity of even which kid changes their name because, you know, reporting fun stuff. And so I would say we don't collect much data other than kind of numbers and ages and towns that kids are from. But there definitely is some great data collection. I will say Trevor Project does a really wonderful job collecting data. GLSEN has some state level data, and the YRBS did ask about gender identity this year, though that data hasn't seemed to become available. I don't know if it will, but I'm hoping that that will help inform decision making.
And then really quick, Jessica, do you feel comfortable sharing that with the behavioral epidemiologist and I in regards to the data you collect, just a simple age and town of children?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you want to send me an email, I'll definitely connect you with our ED and see what we would be able to share.
Thank you, Jessica.
Our
And
collection is pretty much along the same lines as Jessica. We try to keep it pretty low barrier. A lot of times people do not want to share that information for the exact same reasons that Jessica mentioned there. We do try to have the groups kind of form their own topics though. So they're informing the group. It's all based on the desires and needs of the people that come in. So we do collect that sort of data. We don't pass that on to anyone, but we try to create topics around what is presented to us.
Right. And as a rule, we don't collect data by virtue of who we are and what we do. Obviously, we're bound by you know, pretty robust confidentiality laws. And again, is both Fred and Jessica pointed out, you know, we want to keep it a kind of low barrier to entry. So I'm sorry we don't have really good data for you. I get it. I know the epidemiologists need it, but we're not able to supply it.
You know, and one thing, Fred, I'd be interested in learning, understanding, what are those topics that are essential right now? You know, that's kind of information I still would love to gather. So if, again, we can just share emails and discuss that further, I'd be very interested.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you, Fred.
I will say it's also really interesting that we have kind of tried historically to have some topics for youth as they come in, and a lot of the time what they want is to be in a space with other LGBT people where they don't have to explain themselves, but don't actually want to talk about what's happening in their lives, if that makes sense. Or
Yeah.
it's not necessarily LGBT specific. They just want a space to be able to be. And sometimes if we kind of push having that conversation, they're like, that's not why I'm here. And so it's been a lot of really being able to pivot towards what they want and what they're kind of interested in talking about, which is so interesting because I think there's some level of adultism there where we kind of decide like, this is what I think that you should want to talk about, which is different than what's actually helpful. So it's a really interesting kind of conversation in, you know, what is evidence-based practice and what as providers we want to do versus what is actually helpful for the community on the ground, which can often be very different.
No, and just even sharing that and prefacing that, I think is really helpful and useful. I'm a NAMI facilitator and a mental health first aid education peer-to-peer support specialist. So I function in this. So it's so great to work with everyone now. It's wonderful to meet people.
it's great having you here. And I also dropped the New Hampshire YRBS data link in the chat, as well as the New Hampshire Trevor Project data link in the chat as well. If anybody wants to look at that data later on. And I see we have one more question in the chat right now that says, could each presenter share a favorite impact story from your programs? So an impact story or a moment or an interaction that was meaningful and impactful.
I can share one. I have a really recent one that like I feel really good about. I actually had a member come up to me last week, and I want to make sure I phrase it right how they said it. They said, I have people tell me all the time that I'm so brave, and they're happy that I'm as brave as I am to be myself. And what I love about coming to your space is that I don't have to be brave, and I shouldn't have to be brave in my life every day.
And for an impact story, I'm going to point to this gentleman right here. David is remarkable, both as a volunteer group leader and a human being. And to see him thrive the way he has, and now leading a group, is just amazing. And I am so proud of him and the work that he does.
Thank you.
Oh, how do I follow those two? Ooh, I feel like there are so many of those literal moments that don't always happen often, but when they do, you're like, oh, this all matters. So I'll say from the direct support world, we did have a art opening recently with the Art Association where our youth were able to create pieces that were hung in a gallery, which was so cool. And there was a parent with their youth who came up and was like, I don't think you know how much this group has meant. Like this, I think this group is why my child is here and is able to do this today and is like this kid in front of you, because they weren't this kid a year ago. They were so withdrawn, and now they are this kid who can put their art in a gallery and can show up. And that is just, oh, I love those moments. And I will say, you don't have as many of those moments in training adults, which is a big part of my job, but you do have those things where it's someone who walked in and is like, you know, I'm not going to call someone by their pronouns, to leaving and saying, maybe I don't fully understand, but I now understand that this is what I need to do to keep the people around me safe and happy. And those are moments where you're like, we're moving forward and we're growing, and this is all worth it.
Thank you all. Man, I wasn't expecting to get a little teary-eyed today at this, but here we are. Are there any other questions from our participants today?
I have another comment question.
Yeah.
So, and Jessica, you'll know this because I was already in your inbox about it. But you know, I oversee the 988 Lifeline system in New Hampshire with the federal grants and the state contracts that go to support that. And there's a national like sub network to support, you know, through Trevor Project, LGBTQIA plus youth and young adults. Though I don't know if they've ever given me an upper limit on. I think anyone can call and press 988 and they won't deny you regardless of your age. But they do sort of say that it's for youth and young adults. And I've been watching the utilization pattern by area code in the metrics that I receive, and notice that it's, of all of the sub networks, it's the strongest one that's utilized. The other sub networks are Spanish speaking. We also have the Veterans Crisis Line, and with Trevor Project being so new to 988, it's just, I was really excited to see that it's already being marketed in a way that youth feel like it's accessible and that they're utilizing it. It's through phone, text, or chat. It's very easy to remember 988, and then they prompt you to press 3. And so I am so interested in like having some strategies on getting the word out to our New Hampshire residents about this valuable resource. It's sort of that idea of trying to call early and often, and Fred, your warm line is probably in the same vein, right? Like just call us earlier and often so we can catch you before a crisis. And I'm hearing just wonderful things about the Trevor Project sub-network, and would love to hear if anyone has, if you are familiar with it, or if this is the first time you're hearing of it, and how we can like just get the word out, I guess, a little bit, in like an outreach strategy with some of the folks that you are already engaged with, but also I think some of the folks that aren't engaged in your programming yet, but still need support. And I see this as that 3 a.m., right? Like it's middle of the night and you can't sleep, and you've had a very overwhelming day, and your safe adults or wherever you're staying are not available to chat with you, but you're having thoughts of suicide, or you are feeling really sad and overwhelmed, and you can text someone with the phone that you are already scrolling through Instagram with, or you're on TikTok, and like you can just dial that in and reach out when you need it. And I just find it such a powerful tool. And so it's not a question, but more it's like I'm just feel really optimistic and hopeful. And also it's not good enough yet, because I really think not enough people know about 988, I think in general, and then to know what these sub networks can do for folks can be really supportive.
I don't usually recommend this because I think the site itself is toxic, but it's actually been pretty successful for us in building our warm line outreach and a little bit of other outreach, especially with that age group, is getting a TikTok account for your organization and actually putting that stuff out there on TikTok. That is where you're going to get the age group that you're talking about. You're not going to get them on Facebook or anything like that, but like TikTok, Twitch, places like that, that's where you're going to see that age group.
Yeah. I know that the national, federal government is doing some, like a large marketing push, I'm hoping, and it's focused on youth and young adults, LGBTQIA+, Native and Indigenous, BIPOC. But I would have to partner with someone that could have access to it. I don't think the Department of Health and Human Services would be in favor of I don't know what justification I could provide that they would approve that, but it's so true though, that's where they are.
If there's a organization that wants to partner and launch a campaign, though, I'm getting my master's in public health and MBA, so I've done social media strategies. So
yeah,
if the opportunity is available and we can get the word out within your organizations, please let us know.
Got the.
So I'll put the contact information for my community outreach coordinator in here.
Sure.
She's also the woman who runs our LGBTQ group. And she's very good at social media and getting the word out on those things. So I'll put it
Yeah.
right in the chat for you.
That's great. We're just like starting to develop, and Kim, we're going to pull the SPC in to this through the communications and with you all, so that it's very, aligned, and that we're all sort of, it's not something that I'm like, oh, tomorrow we're just gonna start scattershotting some materials out into the world, but it is something that's on my mind as I'm seeing the data come through month over month and seeing utilization of these across modalities. It's not just calls, it's through text and chat. So it's kind of exciting to see, and is another tool in the
Yeah,
belt.
we'd love to help you get the word out.
Live
about that,
support
so.
group in person, and then also in between, sessions, I could have support. So.
And if anybody, I know you guys do in person and virtual, but if anybody needs swag, which I know is such an overused word, but kind of fun, we have like magnets and more details. So if you have tables at your support groups and you want to just leave some swag, or if you do, I know NAMI always like shares resources a lot of times at the beginning of their groups, just plug and play.
Yes.
And ask questions how to get these, because I will literally hand deliver, because I want to meet you wonderful people.
I will say for youth, and actually adults too, is thinking about what we constitute as a crisis. I think for a lot of folks who have maybe grown up in a survival mode or are kind of existing day to day in a kind of survival state, what they would constitute as a crisis to call a crisis line is often what we would be like, oh my gosh, like it was a crisis weeks ago, but you didn't constitute it as a crisis until right this moment when things have like totally hit the fan. And so I would say part of that messaging too is being able to help, especially young people, but also adults, to understand what a crisis line can be used for. And if you call, even when you're not in an active, I might hurt myself mode, that's still a time that you can call. And so I think being able to really clarify with folks what constitutes a call to a crisis line, I think can be really helpful too.
Brett, I don't know if you've come across this and how you talk about warm line versus crisis line, but I would love to not use the term crisis whenever I talk about 988, because we just want to be more upstream than that.
And I definitely agree with Jessica that people wait too long to call those lines. And so a warm line, the way I always explain it to people is that it's similar in nature, right? Like if you're in distress, you call, but it's without fear of intervention, right? So we're not going to call the cops on you. You're not going to be hospitalized. Obviously, if it's outside of our scope, what we are going to do is we are going to recommend very heavily that you call someone else, and we're going to let you know that it's probably not appropriate for us to stay on the line. And we're going to ask you if you want us to contact some sort of services. But I always describe it as a place that you can call without fear of intervention, because that is often what prevents people from calling those lines, is that they are worried that someone is going to be called on them, that they're going to be hospitalized, that there's going to be authorities involved. We do not do that.
And I know a lot of peers really value that aspect of, you know, it can be there's no lie around the involvement of a police or first responder forward response, and how it can be not just damaging in terms of, you know, utilization, but it can be so harmful and lethal at times.
Well, thank you for this wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for the resource sharing that we have been doing here today. If we have one last question, we have time for one more.
I have actually, and this is a little off the program, but a question for Catherine. Just I'm so intrigued and heartened to hear about the use of pressing 3 and getting the option for Trevor Project when folks are calling 988. And frankly, I'm quite surprised, just because the messaging around the Veterans Crisis Line has been everywhere for so long. So I'm surprised to see, because I really haven't seen a ton of messaging, and it's quite new that you can press 3 for Trevor. So that's just really, really interesting. I'm kind of unpacking that in my brain right now.
I can share the data with you, Kim. I'm thrilled to see. Yeah.
But my question is, so how would it work if somebody, we're going to assume right now they have a 603 area code, because we can know that's different. So if they reach out to 988 with their 603 area code here in New Hampshire, and they press 3 for Trevor, are they going to be able to get a handoff to a rapid response access team if they needed that? So if they need a response.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, not necessarily. It's not built into a protocol with any of the national sub networks. So, you know, so typically if you called 988 and you didn't press any numbers, maybe other than 00 will get you direct access, bypass everything and get you right to a counselor. But if you have a 603 number, you're going to reach typically a 988 Lifeline Center in New Hampshire, which is operated by Headrest, that has protocols in place and an MOU in place with Carillon that can do a warm transfer to the access point to get you a mobile crisis deployment. But if you are a caller, texter, or chatter that is accessing a national subnetwork, they are servicing the entire nation. So they don't have the ability or protocols in place to transfer anyone. Also, it's not best practice. I mean, we have established in our state for New Hampshire callers to get a crisis response mobile crisis team, but we typically would not want to transfer someone without going through the entire risk, you know, assessment and make sure that they were in a good place to then hand that call off, knowing that they were in a safe location, that they were in, you know, stabilized through de-escalation, and that they could loop people back to local resources. All Lifeline centers will attempt to find local resources with every caller. So it's really also up to us in New Hampshire to make sure that that information is really accessible. And so that when a crisis counselor is potentially Googling something, that we have that information really easy. I'm even thinking about the resources in this call. You know, I know I use the NAMI New Hampshire website really often because you have this great collection of LGBTQ plus resources. I know exactly those links are live and I can find what I need and kind of get to where I'm going. And so I think it's thinking of those things about how easy is it to find the information if I'm a crisis counselor. Our crisis counselors in New Hampshire take calls from New Hampshire folks, but also our national backup. So they are often finding resources for folks in Montana. There was a military individual who called, but they were in Vietnam and were able to find some resources. And so they're able to find things. Really, they're fantastic. But no, there's no direct protocol if someone contacts Trevor Project to get them back to New Hampshire to get a mobile crisis team.
Thank you so much for that. And sorry to hijack. And I did see in the chat that Julia, if Julia is able to share her email, there's interest in that from Gray.
Thank you.
Any last questions? We have 5 more minutes, so
I also just wanted to share, I'm between Portsmouth and Alton, New Durham, so that's where I'm located. And then for an impact thing, my sibling, and again, permission to share this because I knew about this meeting, we just went and saw my aunt who's 80 years old and did not see my sibling from she to him use correct pronouns the whole time. When they made a mistake, quickly like fixed it. And it was just amazing to know that although you're 80 years old, you can still listen, hear, and appreciate a transition. So that was my little fun little share of the impact. Also, my MBA brain was on when you were sharing this. Some of this should totally be in testimonials. Jessica, the one with your parent, you know, my child has totally blossomed and may even be alive, should totally be on your webpage somewhere, because that's such a strengthening for value proposition and speaks to the importance of your 501c3. But again, so happy to be here.
And at NAMI New Hampshire, we do have a couple different story sharing options that can be used either to help reduce stigma in the state of New Hampshire and also when it comes to advocacy at the legislature. So our stigma reduction campaign is 603 Stories. And we have a website for that, which is just 603stories.org. Thank you. And we have a youth and young adults podcast on there. And we also have blog posts sharing people's lived experience and stories. So if anyone is interested in sharing on that, please feel free to send me an email because it really does go a long way for stigma reduction. Beautiful. I cannot wait to hear from you, Julia. And also we are working on compiling a story bank for advocating at the legislature. So if there are any stories that you have that are related to any legislature and you are interested in being a part of that, then feel free to reach out to us as well, and we can connect you with our NAMI New Hampshire Public Policy Department for more information.
I will throw in here as we're kind of having that conversation with my C3 hat off, kind of, sort of, but actually this is education, so my C3 hat can be on. There is a lot going on in the legislature, and I think we can't not talk about it as we're talking about LGBT support groups, because it has a huge impact on folks' mental health, whether or not bills are passed. Just having someone's debate your humanity is harmful inherently. And so really recognizing, I know there are 4, I believe, bills that are going to be on Sununu's desk in the next few weeks. So definitely recommend folks kind of check that out, because it is going to have a huge impact and has had a huge impact on the youth and adults that we all work with, and really recognizing the systems level impact is huge because it does really impact the mental health of the folks that we're working with.